freaking kill me. Yo, Jakuraland. Nice. Who's this? I can't help this feeling deep inside of me. Hello. This coffin is gonna kill me eventually. Hey, we're in the dark. Let's return the light on. Oh, okay. I'm broadcasting. That's nice to know. I am coughing my full head off, which is also less inconvenient. Give me a second. I'm still trying to get all my stuff set up because where am I? This is a grow stream, but technically not a grow stream because I announced it. I'm just trying to get everything set up here. Oh, wow, that changed. Lovely. Why does it change? Changes my phone's IP randomly, so okay, that's all. So cool. Okay. Get set up on here. Okay, cool. Start sending. Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. I can read it now. Maybe. There I am. Cool. Okay, so we are going to try to finish Frankenstein tonight. Since I didn't do it last night because I was dealing with haunts and introducing teenagers to the wonder of being scared. I didn't get scared at all. It's fine. I don't have a fear of death, so why would the threat of death scare me? Really? I mean, okay, let's see. Oh, got a second person already. Cool. Popped in. Looks like it might be my favorite kitty boy, but I'm not gonna check to make sure. Just gonna guess it's a kitty boy. Oh, nope, that's not the one I marked. I'm gonna use share. Get this. On here, so I can put it on the discordance. Okay. Who's getting? Okay. I hope you have no time. It's alright. Seriously, I want this song to play when people play Dead by Daylight every freaking time someone gets stuck on a hook. Because they're doing the scream, I just go, ah, I'm hooked on a feeling. It's just be natural. Come on. Anyway, yeah. Um, lightly caffeinated. No, I'm not. I'm just like chow down on meat, so I'm feeling better. Like I got home from helping deal with some foster babies because the person that's supposed to be taking care of them out of town. What is this? Okay. But I went over and with them and big old fuzzy babies, a couple of small furry babies. Was come on. Spread the love of the Discord. As I quite frankly like 10 people or so tonight would be great if they came in. So if anyone's doing a raid, the raid thing I posted on Twitter. Not really sure about the accuracy, but people who came in on raids apparently don't count for some reason. I'm not sure why. I'm trying to see how many different Discords I'm going to post it. I'm not what. One more, just for the hell of it. Promote my stuff. Post back to my old chat group. Okay. Hey, Yo Joe, how you doing? Oh. I'm drinking instant iced coffee, so it's a little bitter. But hey, it's coffee. I'll drink it. Okay. Deciding if I want to wait the standard 10 minutes before I get into the story or not. Playing D&D and not blowing shit up. Well, why are you playing D&D if you're not blowing shit up? Of course, I'm only saying that from the mage point of view because Fireball. But Fireball's always fun. Let's see. Let's add out that fun Fireball audio. Fireball, use nothing but Fireball. Honestly, if you're not blowing shit up, are you really playing D&D? If you're not blowing stuff up, you have to be seducing at least 5 monsters a game, right? Cough drops gonna choke down tonight. Oh, Nightbot's working. Let's see. 8 minutes. Okay. What is that thing? 9 minutes. Oh, one now. Pretty good. Still coughing a lot, but I think this may be more allergic reaction from the really dusty dogs I was playing with before I got home. Dusty dogs. Bedtime. Okay. Reading the book Frankenstein makes me. I'm not sure if it makes me enjoy the movies less or just the fact that they're almost a completely different story. Because it's really funny. The first creation was done in like a side room of a college dorm. And when he was working on the female version, it was literally living in a hovel in Scotland. An island off of Scotland, anyway. Yeah, I'm sure my mouth was a little bit more animated. No one. Okay. We have made it past the 10-minute mark. We're actually at 12. Yeah. Any luck, I should have this story wrapped up by midnight tonight. I'll spend that my time. I wonder if I should find a way to lower my camera so I'm not staring off into the void. I mean, I admittedly made the book prop, so I'm looking at the book. And when I look up and look over at my computer screen, I'm actually looking over here to the chat. So, oop, hound door. Time to get into the story. Did I? No, I need to check something real quick. No, I did not change that. Damn. I don't have a notification. I did not change that. I was soon introduced to the hints of the magistrate. Okay. I've been trying to do my introduction though. Oh, didn't catch the hunter. Oh well. I think I've got at least one of them already. Anyway, 15 minutes in. Let's go. Chapter 20. I was soon introduced into the presence of the magistrate, an old benevolent man with a calm and mild manners. He looked upon me, however, with some degree of severity, and then, turning towards my conductors, he asked who appeared as witness on this occasion. About half a dozen men came forward, and one being selected by the magistrate, he disposed that he had been out fishing the night before with his son and brother-in-law, Daniel Nugent. When about 10 o'clock they observed a strong northerly blast rising, and they accordingly put in for port. It was a very dark night, as the moon had not yet risen. They did not land at the harbor, but as they had been accustomed at a creek about 2 miles below. He walked on first, carrying a part of the fishing tackle, and his companions followed him with some distance. As he was proceeding among the sands, he struck his foot against something, and fell at his length on the ground. His companions came up to assist him, and, by the light of their lantern, they found that he had fallen on the body of a dead man, who was, to all appearance, dead. Their first supposition was that it was the corpse of some person who had been drowned, and was thrown on shore by the waves. But, upon some examination, they found that the clothes were not wet, and even that the body was not then cold. They instantly carried it to the cottage of an old woman near the spot, and endeavored, but in vain, to restore it to life. He appeared to be a handsome young man, about 5 and 20 years of age. He had apparently been strangled, for there was no sign of any violence, except the black mark of fingers on his neck. The first part of this deposition did not in the least interest me, but when the mark of the fingers was mentioned, I remembered the murder of my brother, and felt myself extremely agitated. My limbs trembled, and a mist came over my eyes, which obliged me to lean on a chair for support. The magistrate observed me with a keen eye, and of course drew an unfavorable augury from my manner. The son confirmed the father's account, but when Daniel Nugent was called, he swore positively that just before the fall of his companion, he saw a boat with a single man on it, at a short distance from the shore, and, as far as he could judge by the light of a few stars, it was the same boat in which I had just landed. A woman disposed that she lived near the beach and was standing at the door of her cottage, waiting for the return of the fishermen. About an hour before she heard of the discovery of the body, when she saw a boat with only one man in it push off from that part of the shore where the corpse was afterwards found. Another woman confirmed the account of the fishermen having brought the body into her house. It was not cold. They put it into a bed, rubbed it, and Daniel went to the town for the apothecary, but life was quite gone. Several other men were examined concerning my landing, and they agreed that, with the strong north wind that had arisen during the night, it was very probable that I had beaten about for many hours, and had been obliged to return nearly to the same spot from which I had departed. Besides, they observed that it appeared that I had brought the body from another place, and it was likely that I did not appear to know the shore. I might have put into the harbor ignorant of the distance of the town from the place where I had deposited the corpse. Mr. Kerwin, on hearing this evidence, desired that I should be taken to the room where the body lay for interment, that it might be observed what effect the sight of it would have on me. This idea was probably suggested by the extreme agitation I had exhibited when the mode of the murder had been described. It was accordingly conducted by the magistrate and several other persons to the end. I could not help being struck by the strange coincidences that had taken place during the eventful night, but knowing that I had been conversing with several persons of the island I had inhabited about the time the body had been found, I was perfectly tranquil as to the consequences of the affair. I entered the room where the corpse lay, and was led up to the coffin. How can I describe the sensations on beholding it? I feel yet parched with horror, nor can I reflect on that terrible moment without shuddering in agony. That faintly reminds me of the anguish of recognition. The trial, the presence of the magistrate and witnesses, passed like a dream from my memory when I saw the lifeless form of Henry Clerval stretched before me. I gasped for breath, and throwing myself on the body, exclaimed, "Have my murderous machinations deprived you also, my dearest Henry, of life? Two I have already destroyed, another victim await their destiny, but you, Clerval, my friend, my benefactor." The human frame could no longer support the agonizing suffering that I endured, and I was carried out of the room in strong convulsions. The fever succeeded to this. I lay for 2 months at the point of death. My ravings, as I afterwards heard, were frightful. I called myself the murderer of William, of Justine, and of Clerval. Sometimes I entreated my attendants to assist me in the destruction of the fiend by whom I was tormented, and at others I felt the fingers of the monster already grasping my neck, and screamed aloud with agony and terror. Fortunately, as I spoke my native language, Mr. Cohen alone understood me, but my gestures and bitter cries were sufficient to affright the other witnesses. Why did I not die? More miserable than man ever was before, why did I not sink into forgetfulness and rest? Death snatches away many blooming children, the only hopes of their doting parents. How many brides and youthful lovers have been one day in the bloom of health and hope, and the next the prey for worms in the decay of the tomb? Of what materials was I made that I could thus resist so many shocks, which, like the turning of a wheel, continually renewed the torture? But I was doomed to live, and in 2 months found myself awakened from a dream, in a prison, stretched on a wretched bed, surrounded by gaolers, turnkeys, bolts, and all the miserable apparatus of a dungeon. In the morning, I remember, when I thus awoke to understanding, I had forgotten the particulars of what had happened, and only felt as if some great misfortune had suddenly overwhelmed me. But when I looked around and saw the barred windows, and the squalidness of the room in which I was, all flashed across my memory, and I groaned bitterly. This disturbed an old woman who was sleeping in a chair beside me. She was a hired nurse, the wife of one of the turnkeys, and her countenance expressed all those bad qualities often characterized that class. The lines in her face were hard and rude, like that of a person accustomed to see without sympathizing in sights of misery. Her tone expressed her entire indifference. She addressed me in English. The voice struck me as one I had heard during my sufferings. "Are you better now, sir?" said she. I replied in the same language, but with a feeble voice. "I believe I am, but if it all be true, if indeed I did not dream, I am sorry that I am still alive to feel this misery and horror." "For that matter," replied the old woman, "if you mean about the gentleman you murdered, I believe it were better for you if you were dead, for I fancy it will go hard with you. But you will be hung when the sessions come on. However, that's none of my business. I am sent to nurse you and to get you well. I do my duty with a safe conscience. It were well if everybody did the same." I turned with loathing from the woman who could utter so unfeeling a speech to a person just saved, on the very edge of death. But I felt languid, unable to reflect on all that had passed. The whole series of my life appeared to me as a dream. I sometimes doubted if indeed it were all true, for it never presented itself to my mind with the force of reality. As the images that floated before me became more distinct, I grew feverish. The darkness pressed around me. No one was near, me, who soothed me with a gentle voice of love. No dear hand supported me. The physician came, prescribed medicines, and the old woman prepared them for me. But utter calmness was visible in the first, and the expression of brutality was strongly marked in the visage of the second. Who could be interested in the fate of a murderer but the hangman who would gain his fee? These were my first reflections, but as soon as I learned that Mr. Kerwin had shown me extreme kindness, he was caused he had caused the best room in the prison to be prepared for me. Wretched indeed was the best, and it was he who had provided a physician and nurse. It is true he seldom came to see me, for although he ardently desired to relieve the sufferings of every human creature, he did not wish to be present at the agonies and miserable ravings of a murderer. He came, therefore, sometimes to see that I was not neglected, but his visits were short and at long intervals. One day, when I was gladly recovering, I was seated in a chair, my eyes half open, and my cheeks livid like those of death. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected that I had better seek death that remained miserably pent up, only to be let loose in a world replenished with wretchedness. At one time I considered whether I should not declare myself guilty and suffer the penalty of the law, less innocent than poor Justine had been. Such were my thoughts when the door of my apartment was opened and Mr. Kerwin entered. His countenance expressed sympathy and compassion. He drew a chair close to mine and addressed me in French. I hear that this place is very shocking to you. Can I do anything to make you more comfortable? I thank you, but all that you mention is nothing to me. On the whole earth, there is no comfort which I am capable of receiving. I know that the sympathy of a stranger can be but of little relief to be borne down as you are by so strange a misfortune. But you will, I hope, soon quit this melancholy abode, for doubtless evidence can easily be brought to free you from the criminal charge. That is the least of my concern. I am, by a course of strange events, become the most miserable of mortals. Persecuted and tortured as I am and have been, can death be any evil to me? Nothing indeed can be more unfortunate and agonizing than the strange chances that have lately occurred. You were thrown by some surprise accident on the shore, renowned for its hospitality, seized immediately and charged with murder. The first sight that was presented to your eye was the body of your friend, murdered in no unaccountable manner, placed, as it were, by some fiend across your path. As Mr. Kerwin said this, notwithstanding the agitation I endured on this retrospect of my sufferings, I also felt considerable surprise at the knowledge he seemed to possess concerning me. I suppose some astonishment was exhibited in my countenance, for Mr. Kerwin hastened to say, I was not till a day or two after your illness that I thought of examining your dress, that I might discover some trace by which I could send your relations an account of your misfortune and illness. I found several letters, and among others, one of which I discovered from the commencement from your father. I instantly wrote to Geneva. Nearly 2 months have elapsed since the departure of my letter. But you are ill. Even now you tremble. You are unfit for agitation of any kind. This suspense is 1,000 times worse than the most horrible events. Tell me what the new scene of death has been acted, and whose murder I am now to lament. Your family is perfectly well, said Mr. Kerwin with gentleness. And someone, a friend, has come to visit you. I know not by what chain of thoughts the idea presented itself, but I instantly darted into my mind that the murderer had come to mock, had my misery taught me to the death of Clerval, as new and excite, as new incitements for me to comply to his hellish desires. I put my hands before my eyes and cried out in agony. Oh, take him away! I cannot see him. For God's sake, do not let him enter. Mr. Clerval regarded me with a troubled countenance. He could not help regarding my exclamation as a presumption of my guilt, and said in a rather severe tone, I should have thought, young man, that the presence of your father would have been welcome, instead of inspiring such violent repugnance. My father! I cried, while every feature and every muscle was relaxed from anguish to pleasure. Is my father indeed come? How kind, how very kind. But where is he? Why does he not hasten to me? My change of manner surprised and pleased the magistrates. Perhaps he thought that my former exclamation was a momentary return of delirium, and now he instantly resumed his former benevolence. He rose and quitted the room with my nurse, and in a moment my father entered it. Nothing at this moment could have given me greater pleasure than the arrival of my father. I outstretched my hand to him and cried, Are you then safe, and Elizabeth, and Ernest? My father calmed me with assurances of their welfare, and endeavored, by dwelling on these subjects so interesting to my heart, to raise my desponding spirits, but he soon felt that a prison cannot be the abode of cheerfulness. What a place is this that you inhabit, my son? He said, looking mournfully at the barred windows and wretched appearance of the room. You traveled here to seek happiness, but a fatality seems to pursue you. And poor Clerval. The name of my unfortunate and murdered friend was an agitation too great to be endured in my weak state. I shed tears. Alas, my father, replied I, some destiny of most horrible kind hangs over me. I must live to fulfill it, or surely I should have died on the coffin of Henry. We were not allowed to converse for any length of time, for the precarious state of my health rendered every precaution necessary that could ensure tranquillity. Mr. Kerwin came in and insisted that my strength should not be exhausted by too much exertion. But the appearance of my father was to me like that of a good angel, and I gradually recovered my health. As my sickness quitted me, I was absorbed by a gloomy and black melancholy that nothing could dissipate. The image of Clerval was for ever before me, ghastly and murdered. More than once the agitation into which these reflections threw me made my friends dread a dangerous relapse. Alas, why did they preserve so miserable and detestable a life? It was surely that I might fulfill my destiny, which is now drawing to a close. Soon, oh, very soon, will death anguish these throbbings, and relieve me of the mighty weight of anguish that bears me to dust. And, executing the word of justice, I shall also sink to rest. The appearance of death was distant, although the wish was ever present to my thoughts, and I often thought for hours, motionless and speechless, wishing for some mighty revolution that might bury me and my destroyer in its ruins. The season of the assizes approached. I had already been 3 months in prison, and although I was still weak and in continual danger of relapse, I was obliged to travel nearly 100 miles to the county town where the court was held. Mr. Kerwin charged himself with every care of collecting witnesses and arranging my defense. I was spared the disgrace of appearing publicly as a criminal, as the death was not brought before the court that decides on life and death. The grand jury rejected the bill, and it's being proved that I was on the Orkney Island at the hour the body of my friend was found. And a fortnight after my removal, I was liberated from prison. My father was enraptured on finding me freed from the vexations of a criminal charge, that I was again allowed to breathe fresh atmosphere and allowed to return to my native country. I did not participate in these feelings, for the walls of the dungeon or palace were like hateful. The cup of life was poisoned forever, and although the sun shone upon me, as happy and gay of heart, I saw around me nothing but a dense and frightful darkness, penetrated by no light but the glimmer of two eyes that glared upon me. Sometimes they would be expressive eyes of Henry, languishing in death, the dark orbs nearly covered by the lids, and the long black lashes that fringed them. Sometimes it was the watery, clouded eyes of the monster, as I first saw them in the chamber of Ingolstadt. My father decided to awaken me in feelings of affection. He talked of Geneva, which I should soon visit, of Elizabeth, and Ernest. These words only drew deep groans from me. Sometimes, indeed, I felt a wish for happiness, and thought, with melancholy delight, of my beloved cousin, or longed with a devouring malade de paz to see once more the blue lake and the rapid Rhone that had been so dear to me in the early childhood. But my general state of feeling was a torpor, in which a prison was a welcome residence to the divinest scene of nature, and these fits were seldom interrupted but the paroxysms of anguish and despair. At these moments I often endeavored to put an end to the existence I loathed, and it required unceasing attendance and vigilance to restrain me from committing some dreadful act of violence. I remember, as I quitted the prison, I heard one of them say, "Man, he may be innocent of the murder, but he certainly had a bad conscience." These words struck me. A bad conscience. Yes, surely I had one. William Justine, now Clerval, had died enough through my infernal machinations, and whose death, cried I, is to finish the tragedy? Ah, my father, do not remain in this wretched country. Take me where I may forget myself, my existence, and all the world. My father easily acceded to my desire, and after having taken leave of Mr. Kerwin, we hastened to Dublin. I felt as if I was relieved from a heavy weight when the packet sailed on the fire wind of Ireland, and I had quitted forever the country which had been to me the scene of so much misery. It was midnight. My father slept in the cabin, and I lay on the deck looking at the stars and listening to the dashing of the waves. I hailed the darkness that shut Ireland from my sight, and my pulse beat with a feverish joy when I reflected that I should soon see Geneva. The past appeared to me in the light of a frightful dream. The vessel in which I was, the one that blew me from the detestable shore of Ireland, and the sea which surrounded me, too told me forcibly that I was deceived by no vision, and that Clerval, my friend and dearest companion, had fallen a victim to me and the monster of my creation. I repassed in my memory my whole life, my quiet happiness while residing with my family in Geneva, the death of my mother, and my departure for Ingolstadt. I remembered shuddering at the mad enthusiasm that hurried me on my creation of my hideous enemy, and I called to mind the nights during which he first lived. I was unable to pursue the train of thoughts. A thousand feelings pressed upon me, and I wept bitterly. Ever since my recovery from the fever, I had been in the custom of taking every night a small quantity of laudanum, for it was by means of this drug only that I was able to gain rest necessary for the preservation of life. Oppressed by the recollection of my various misfortunes, I now took a double dose and soon slept profoundly. But sleep did not afford me respite from thought and misery. My dreams presented 1,000 objects that scared me. Towards morning, I was possessed by a kind of nightmare. I felt the fiend's grasp at my neck, could not free myself from it. Groans and cries rung in my ears. My father, who was watching over me, perceived my restlessness, awoke me, and pointed to the port of Holyhead, which we were now entering. Chapter 21. We had resolved not to go to London, but to cross the country to Portsmouth, and thence to embark from Havre. I preferred this plan principally because I had dreaded to see again those places in which I had enjoyed the few moments of tranquillity with my beloved Clerval. I thought with horror of seeing those persons whom we had accustomed to visit together, and who might make inquiries concerning events, the very remembrance of which made me again feel the pang I endured when I gazed into the lifeless form at the inn. As for my father, his desires and exertions were bounded to again seeing me restored to health and peace of mind. His tenderness and attentions were unremitting. My grief and gloom was obstinate, but he did not despair. Sometimes he thought that I felt deeply the degradation of being obliged to answer a charge of murder, and he endeavored to prove to me the futility of pride. Alas, my father, said I, how little you do know me. Human beings, their feelings and passions, would indeed be degraded if such a wretch as I felt pride. Justine, poor unhappy Justine, was as innocent as I, and she suffered the same charge. She died for it, and I am the cause for this. I murdered her. William, Justine, and Henry, they all died by my hands. That sounded like cut off really fast. I didn't hear what it said. Or it was like night. My father had often, during my imprisonment, heard me make the same assertion. When I thus accused myself, he sometimes seemed to desire an explanation, and at others he appeared to consider it caused by delirium, and that, during my illness, some kind of this had presented itself to my imagination, the remembrance of which I preserved in my convalescence. I avoided explanation, and maintained a continual silence concerning the wretch I had created. I had a feeling that I should be supposed mad, and this has forever chained my tongue. When I should have given the world the confided the fatal secret. Yet still words like those I have recorded would burst uncontrollably from me. I could offer no explanation for them, but their truth in part relieved the burden of my mysterious will. Upon this occasion, my father said, with an expression of unbounded wonder, "What do you mean, Victor? Are you mad? My dear son, I entreat you never make such an assertion again." "I am not mad," I cried energetically. "The sun and the heavens, who have viewed my operations, can bear witness to my truth. I am the assassin of those most innocent victims. They died by my machinations. 1,000 times would I have shed my own blood, drop by drop, to have saved their lives. But I could not, my father. Indeed, I could not sacrifice the whole human race." The conclusion of the speech convinced my father that my ideas were deranged, and he instantly changed the subject for further conversation and endeavored to alter the course of my thoughts. He wished as much as possible to obliterate the memory of the scenes that had taken place in Ireland, and never alluded to them or suffered me to speak of my misfortunes. As time passed away, I became more calm. Misery had a growing in my heart, but I no longer talked in the same incoherent manner of my own crimes. Sufficient for me was the consciousness of them, but the utmost self-violence I curbed the imperious voice of wretchedness, which sometimes desired to declare itself to the whole world, and my manners were calmer and more composed than they had been ever since the beginning of my journey to the Sea of Ice. We have arrived at Havre on the 8th of May, and instantly proceeded to Paris, where my father had some business which detained us for a few weeks. In the city, I received the following letter from Elizabeth. To dear Frankenstein, my dearest friend, it gave me the greatest pleasure to receive a letter from my uncle dated Paris. You are no longer at a formidable distance, and I may hope to see you soon in less than a fortnight. My poor cousin, how much you have suffered. I expect to see you looking even more ill than when you quitted Geneva. This winter has been passed most miserably, tortured as I have been by anxious suspense. Yet I hope to see peace in your countenance, and to find that your heart is not totally devoid of comfort and tranquillity. Yet I fear the same feelings now exist that made you so miserable a year ago, even perhaps augmented by time. I would not disturb you at this period when so many misfortunes weigh upon you, but a conversation that I had with my uncle previous to his departure renders some explanation necessary before we meet. Explanation, you may possibly say. What can Miss Elizabeth have to explain? If you really say this, my questions are answered, and I have no more to do than sign myself to your affectionate cousin. But you are distant from me, and it is possible that you may dread and yet be pleased with this explanation. And in a probability of this being the case, I dare not longer postpone writing what, during your absence, I have often wished to express to you, but have never had the courage to begin. You know, Victor, that our union has been the favorite plan of your parents ever since our infancy. We were told this when young, and taught to look forward to it as an event that would certainly take place. We were affectionate playfellows during childhood, and I believe dear and valued friends to one another as we grew older. But as brother and sister, often entertained a lively affection towards each other, without desiring a more intimate union. But may not such be our case? Tell me, dearest Victor, answer me, I conjure you, by our mutual happiness, the simple truth. Do you not love another? You have traveled, you have spent several years of your life at Ingolstadt, and I confess to you, my friend, that when I saw you last autumn so unhappy, flying to solitude, from the society of every creature, I could not help supposing that you might regard our connection, and believe yourself bound in honor to fulfill the wishes of your parents, although they oppose themselves to your inclinations. But this is false reasoning. I confess to you, my cousin, that I love you, and that my airy dreams of futurity you have been my constant friend and companion. But it is your happiness I desire as well as my own. When I declare to you that our marriage would render me utterly miserable, unless it were to dictate of your own free choice. Even now I weep to think that, borne down as you are by the cruelest misfortunes, you may stifle, by the word honor, all hope that of love and happiness which I would alone restore to you myself. I, who have so disinterested an affection for you, may increase your miseries tenfold by being an obstacle to your wishes. Ah, Victor, Be assured that your cousin and playmate has too sincere a love for you not to be made miserable by the supposition. Be happy, my friend. If you obey me in this one request, remain satisfied that nothing on earth will have the power to interrupt my tranquillity. Do not let this letter disturb you. Do not answer tomorrow or the next day, or even until you come, if it will give you pain. My uncle will send news of your health, and if I see but one smile on your lips when we meet, occasioned by this or any other exhortations of mine, I shall need no other happiness. Elizabeth Vivenza, Geneva, May 18th. This letter revived in my memory what I had before forgotten. The threat of the fiend. I will be with you on your wedding night. Such was my sentence, and on that night would the demon employ every art to destroy me, and tear me from the glimpse of happiness which promised partly to console my sufferings. On that night he had determined to consummate his crimes with my death. Well, be it so, a deadly struggle would then assuredly take place, if in which, if he was to be victorious, I should be at peace, and his power over me at an end. But if he were vanquished, then I should be a free man. Alas, what freedom! Such as the peasant enjoys when his family has been massacred before his eyes, his cottage burnt, his lands laid to waste, and he is turned adrift, homeless, penniless, and alone, but free. Such would be my liberty, except that in my Elizabeth I possess the treasure. Alas, balanced by those horrors of remorse and guilt which would pursue me until death. Sweet and beloved Elizabeth. I read and reread her letter, and some softened feeling stole into my heart, dared to whisper paradisical dreams of love and joy. But the apple was already eaten, and the angel's arm bared to drive me from all hope. Yet I would die to make her happy. If the monster executed his threat, death was inevitable. Yet again, I considered whether my marriage would hasten my fate. My destruction might indeed arrive a few months sooner, but if my torturer should suspect that I postponed it, influenced by his menaces, he would surely find other, and perhaps more dreadful means of revenge. He had vowed to be with me on my wedding night, yet he did not consider that threat as binding him to peace in the meantime, for, as if to show me that he was not satiated with blood, he had murdered Clerval immediately after the enunciation of his threats. I resolved, therefore, that if my immediate union with my cousin would conduce either to hers or my father's happiness, my adversary's designs against my life should not retard it a single hour. In this state of mind, I wrote to Elizabeth. My letter was cold and affectionate. I fear, my beloved girl, I said, little happiness remains for us on earth, yet all that I may one day enjoy is concentrated on you. Chase away your idle fears. To you alone I do consecrate my life, and my endeavors for contentment. I have one secret, Elizabeth, a dreadful one, which revealed to you it will chill your frame with horror, and then, far from being surprised at my misery, you will only wonder that I survive what I have endured. I will confide to you this tale of misery and terror to you the day after our marriage shall take place, for, my sweet cousin, there must be perfect confidence between us. But until then, I conjure you not, do not mention or allude to it. This I most earnestly entreat. I know you will comply. In about a week after the arrival of Elizabeth's letter, we returned to Geneva. My cousin welcomed me with warm affection, that tears were in her eyes as she beheld the emaciated frame and feverish cheeks. I saw a change in her also. She was thinner and had lost much of her heavenly vivacity that had before charmed me. But her gentleness and soft looks of compassion made her a more fit companion for one blasted and miserable as I was. The tranquillity which I now enjoyed did not endure. Memory brought madness with it, and when I thought of what had passed, a real insanity possessed me. Sometimes I was furious, burnt with rage, sometimes low and despondent. I neither spoke or looked, but sat motionless, bewildered by the multitude of miseries that overcame me. Elizabeth alone had the power to draw me from these fits. Her gentle voice would soothe me when transported by passion, and inspire me when human feelings went sunk in a torpor. She wept with me and for me. When reason returned, she would remonstrate, and endeavor to inspire me with resignation. Ah, it is well for the unfortunate to be resigned, but for the guilty there is no peace. The agonies of remorse poison the luxury there is otherwise sometimes found in indulging in the excess of grief. Soon after my arrival, my father spoke of my immediate marriage with my cousin. I remained silent. Have you, then, some other attachments? None on earth. I love Elizabeth and look forward to our union with delight. Let the day, therefore, be fixed, and on it I will consecrate myself, in life or death, to the happiness of my cousin. My dear Victor, do not speak of such. Heavy misfortunes have befallen us, but let us only cling closer to what remains, and transfer our love for those whom we have lost to those who yet live. Our circle will be small, but bound close by the ties of affection and mutual misfortune. And when time shall have softened your despair, new and dear objects of care will be born to replace those of whom we have been so cruelly deprived. Such were the lessons of my father, but to me the remembrance of the threat returned. Nor can you wonder that, omnipotent as the fiend had yet been of the deeds of blood, I should almost regard him as invincible, and that he had pronounced the words, "I shall be with you on your wedding night." I should regard the threatened fate as unavoidable, but death was no evil to me. If the loss of Elizabeth were balanced with it, and I, therefore, with a contented and even cheerful countenance, agreed with my father that if my cousin would consent, the ceremony should take place in 10 days, thus put, as I imagined, the seal to my fate. Great God! If for one instant I had thought that what might be the hellish intentions of my fiendish adversary, I would rather be banished myself forever to from my native country, and wandering a friendless outcast over the earth, than have consented to miserable marriage. But as if possessed by magical powers, the monster had blinded me to its real intentions, and when I thought that I had prepared only for my death, I hastened that of a far dearer victim. As the period fixed of our marriage drew nearer, whether from cowardice or a prophetic feeling, I felt my heart sink within me, but I concealed my feelings by an appearance of hilarity that brought smiles and joy to the countenance of my father, but hardly deceived the ever watchful and nicer eye of Elizabeth. She looked forward to our union with placid contentment, not unmingled with a little fear, which past misfortunes had impressed, that what now appeared certain and tangible happiness might soon dissipate into an airy dream that leaves no trace but deep and everlasting regret. Preparations were made for the event, congratulatory visits were received, and all wore a smiling appearance. I shut up as well as I could in my own heart the anxiety that preyed there, and entered with seeming earnestness into the plans of my father, although they might only serve as the decorations of my tragedy. A house was purchased for us near Cologne, by which we should enjoy some pleasures of the country, and yet be so near to Geneva as to see my father every day, who would still reside within its walls, for the benefit of Ernest, that he might follow his studies in the schools. In the meantime, I took every precaution to defend my person in case the fiend should openly attack me. I carried pistols and a dagger constantly with me, and was ever to watch to prevent artifice, and by means gained a greater degree of tranquillity. Indeed, the period approached, and the threat appeared more as a delusion, not to be regarded as worthy to disturb my peace, while the happiness I hoped for in my marriage wore a greater appearance of certainty, as the day fixed for its solemnness drew nearer, and I heard it continually spoken as if an occurrence which no accidents could possibly prevent. Elizabeth seemed happy. My tranquil demeanor contributed greatly to calm her mind. But on the day that was to fulfill my wishes and my destiny, she was melancholy, and a presentiment of evil pervaded her. And perhaps also she thought of the dreadful secrets which I had promised to reveal to her on the following day. My father was in the meantime overjoyed, and the bustle of preparation only observed the melancholy of his niece and the diffidence of the bride. After the ceremony was performed, a large party assembled at my father's, but it was agreed that Elizabeth and I should pass the afternoon and night in Evian, and return to Colony the next morning. As the day was fair and the wind favorable, we resolved to go by water. Those were the last moments of my life during which I enjoyed the feeling of happiness. We passed rapidly along. The sun was hot, but we were sheltered from its rays by a kind of canopy while we enjoyed the beauty of the scene. Sometimes on one side of the lake, where we saw Mont Salve, the pleasant banks of the Montenegro, and at a distance, surmounting all, was the beautiful Mount Blanc, and the assemblage of snowy mountains that in vain endeavored to emulate her. Sometimes coasting the opposite banks, we saw a mighty Jura opposing the dark side to the ambition that would quit its native country, and an almost insurmountable barrier to the invader who should wish to enslave it. I took the hand of Elizabeth. "You are sorrowful, my love. Ah, if you knew what I have suffered and what I may yet endure, you would endeavor to let me taste of quiet and freedom from despair, that this one day at least permits us to enjoy." "Be happy, my dear Victor," replied Elizabeth. "There is, I hope, nothing to distress you, and be assured that if a lively joy is not painted in my face, my heart is contented. Something whispers not to me not to depend too much on the prospect that is open before us, but I will not listen to such a sinister voice. Observe how fast we move along, and how the clouds, which sometimes obscure and sometimes rise above the dome of Mont Blanc, render the scene of beauty still more interesting. Look also at the innumerable fish that are swimming in the clear waters, where we can distinguish every pebble that lies at the bottom. What a divine day! How happy and serene all nature appears!" Thus Elizabeth endeavored to divert her thoughts and mind from all reflection upon melancholy subjects, but her temper was fluctuating. Joy for a few instances shone in her eyes, but it continually gave place to distraction and reverie. The sun sank lower in the heavens. We passed the river Grants, and observed its path through the chasms of the Choir and the glens of the lower hills. The Alps here come closer to the lake, and we approach the amphitheater of mountains, which forms the eastern boundary. The spirit of Evian shone under the woods that surrounded us, and the range of mountains above mountains by which was overhung. The wind, which had hitherto carried us along with amazing rapidity, sunk at sunset to a light breeze. The soft air was ruffled with water, and caused a pleasant motion among the trees as we approached the shore, from which it wafted the most delightful scents of flowers and hay. The sun sunk beneath the horizon when we landed, and as I touched the shore, I felt those cares and fears revive, which soon were to clasp me, cling to me forever. Chapter 22. It was 8 o'clock when we landed. We walked for a short time on the shore, enjoying the transitionary night, and then retired to the inn and contemplated the lovely scene of waters, woods, and mountains, obscured in darkness, and yet still displaying their black outlines. The wind, which had fallen in the south, now rose to the great violence in the west. The moon had reached her summit in the heavens and was beginning to descend. The clouds swept across it swifter than the flight of the vulture, and dimmed her rays while the lake reflected the scene of the busy heavens, rendered still busier by the restless waves that were beginning to rise. Suddenly, a heavy storm of rain descended. I had been calm during the day, but as soon as the night obscured the shapes of objects, 1,000 fears rose in my mind. I was anxious and watchful, while my right hand grasped the pistol which was hidden in my bosom. Every sound had terrified me, but I resolved that I would sell my life dearly and not relax the impending conflict until my own life or that of my adversary was extinguished. Elizabeth observed my agitation for some time, timid and fearful silence. At last she said, "What is it that agitates you so, my dear Victor? What is it that you fear?" "Oh, peace, peace, my love," replied I. "This night, and all will be safe. But this night is dreadful, very dreadful." I passed an hour in this state of mind, when suddenly I reflected how dreadful the combat which I had momentarily expected would be to my wife, and I earnestly entreated her to retire, resolving not to join her until I had obtained some knowledge as to the situation of my enemy. She left me, and I continued some time walking up and down the passages of the house, and inspecting every corner that might afford a retreat for my adversary. But I discovered no trace of him, and was beginning to conjecture that some fortunate chance had intervened to prevent the execution of all his menaces. When suddenly I heard a shrill and dreadful scream. It came from the room into which Elizabeth had retired. As I heard it, the whole truth rushed into my mind. My arms dropped, the motion of every muscle and fiber was suspended. I could feel the blood trickling in my veins, and tingling with the extremities of my limbs. The state lasted but for an instant. The scream was repeated, and I rushed into the room. Great God, why did I not then expire? Why am I here to relate this destruction of my best hope, of the purest creature of earth? She was there, lifeless and inanimate, thrown across the bed, her head hanging down, and her pale, distorted features half covered by her hair. Everywhere I turn, I see the same figure, her bloodless arms and relaxed form hung by the murderer on its bridal bier. Could I behold this and live? Alas, life is obstinate and clings closest where it was most hated. For a moment only did I lose recollection. I fainted. When I recovered, I found myself surrounded by the people of the inn. Their countenances expressed breathless terror, but the horror of the others appeared only as a mockery, a shadow of the feelings that oppressed me. I escaped from them to the room where lay the body of Elizabeth, my love, my wife, so lately living, so dear, so worthy. She had been moved from the posture in which I had first beheld her, and now she lay, her head upon her arm, and a handkerchief thrown across her face and neck. I might have supposed her asleep. I rushed towards her and embraced her with ardor, but the deathly languor and coldness of the limbs told me that what I now held in my arms had ceased to be the Elizabeth whom I loved and cherished. The murderous mark of the fiend's grasp was on her neck, and the breath had ceased to issue from her lips. While I still hung over her in the agony of despair, I happened to look up. The windows of the room had been darkened, and I felt a kind of panic on seeing the pale yellow light of the moon illuminate the chamber. The shutters had been thrown back, and with a sensation of horror not to be described, I saw at the window a figure the most hideous and abhorred. A grin on the face of the monster. He seemed to jeer, as with his fiendish finger he pointed towards the corpse of my wife. I rushed towards the window, drawing my pistol from my bosom, shot, but he eluded me, leaped from his station, and running with the swiftness of lightning, plunged into the lake. The report of the pistol brought a crowd into the room. I pointed to the spot where he had disappeared. We followed the track of the boats. Nets were cast, but in vain. After passing several hours, we returned hopeless, most of my companions believing it to have been a form conjured of my own fancy. After having landed, they proceeded to search the country, parties going in different directions among the woods and vines. I did not accompany them. I was exhausted. A film covered my eyes, and my skin was parched with the heat of fever. In this state, I lay on the bed, hardly conscious of what had happened. My eyes wandered around the room as if to seek something that I had lost. At length, I remembered that my father was anxiously expecting the return of Elizabeth and myself, and that I must return alone. This reflection brought tears into my eyes, and I wept for a long time. But my thoughts rambled to various subjects, reflecting on my misfortunes and their cause. I was bewildered in a cloud of wonder and horror. The death of William, the execution of Justine, the murder of Percival, and lastly of my wife. Even at that moment I knew not that my only remaining friends were safe from the malignity of the fiend. My father even now might be writhing under his grasp, and Ernest might be dead at his feet. This idea made me shudder and recalled me to action. I started up and resolved to return to Geneva with all possible speed. There were no horses to be procured, and I must return by the lake. But the wind was unfavorable, and the rain fell in torrents. However, it was hardly morning, and I might reasonably hope to arrive by night. I hired men to row, and took an oar myself, for I had always experienced relief from the menial torments of bodily exercise. But the overflowing misery I now felt, and the excess of agitation that I endured, rendered me incapable of any exertion. I threw down the oar, and leaning my head upon my hands, gave way to every gloomy idea that arose. If I looked up, I saw the scenes which were familiar to me in the happier time, and which I had contemplated but the day before the company of her who was now but a shadow and recollection. Tears streamed from my eyes. The rain now ceased for a moment, and I saw the fish play in the waters as they had done a few hours before. They had been observed by Elizabeth. Nothing is so painful to the human mind as a great and sudden change. The sun might shine, or the clouds might lower, but nothing could appear to me as it had done the day before. A fiend had snatched from me every hope of future happiness. No creature had ever been so miserable as I was, so frightened at events that single the history of man. But why should I dwell upon the incidents that followed his last overwhelming event? Mine had been a tale of horrors. I have reached the acme, and what I now must relate to you can be tedious at best. Know that, one by one, my friends were snatched away. I was left desolate. My own strength is exhausted, and I must tell, in a few words, remains of my hideous narration. I arrived at Geneva. My father and Ernest yet lived, but the former sunk under the tidings that I bore. I see him now, excellent and venerable old man. His eyes widened in vacancy, for they had lost their charm and the delight. His niece, his more than daughter, whom he had doted on with all the affection which a man feels, who, at the decline of his life, having few affections, clings more earnestly to choose that remain. Hey, writer. Cursed be the fiend that brought misery on his gray hairs, and doomed him to waste and wretchedness. He could not live under the horrors that were accumulated around him. An apoplectic fit was brought on, and in a few days he died in my arms. What then became of me? I do not know. I lost sensation, and chains and darkness were the only objects that pressed upon me. Sometimes, indeed, I dreamt that I wandered in flowery meadows, in pleasant vales with the friends of my youth, but awoke and found myself in a dungeon. Melancholy followed, but by degrees I gained a clear conception of my miseries and situation, and was released from my prison, for they had called me mad, and during many months, as I understood, a solitary cell had been my habitation. But liberty had been a useless gift to me, I had not. As I awakened to reason, at the same time I awakened to revenge. As the memory of past misfortunes pressed upon me, I began to reflect on their cause. The monster whom I had created, the miserable demon whom I had sent abroad into the world for my destruction. I was possessed by a maddening rage when I thought of him, and desired and ardently prayed that I might have him within my grasp to wreak a great and signal revenge on his cursed head. Nor did my hate long confine me to useless wishes. I began to reflect on the best means of securing him, and for this purpose, about a month after my release, I repaired to a criminal judge in the town, and I told him that I had an accusation to make, that I knew the destroyer of my family, and that I required him to exert his whole authority for the apprehension of this murderer. The magistrate listened to me with attention and kindness. Be assured, sir, he said, no pains or exertions on my part shall be spared to discover the villain. I thank you, replied I. Listen, therefore, to the disposition I have to make. It is indeed a tale so strange that I should fear you would not credit it, were there not something in truth which, however wonderful, forces conviction. The story is too connected to be mistaken for a dream, and I have no motive for falsehood. My manner, as thus I addressed him, was impressive but calm. I had formed in my own heart the resolution to propose my destroyer to death, and this purpose quieted my agony and provisionally reconciled me to life. I now related my history briefly, but with firmness and precision, marking the dates with accuracy, never deviating into invective or exclamation. The magistrate appeared first perfectly incredulous, but as I continued, he became more attentive and interested. I saw him sometimes shudder with horror, at others a lively surprise. Unmingled with disbelief was painted on his countenance. When I had concluded my narration, I said, this is the being whom I accuse, and for those detection and punishment I call upon you to exert your whole power. It is your duty as magistrates, and as I believe and hope your feelings as a man will not revolt from the execution of those functions on this occasion. This address caused a considerable change in the physiognomy of my auditor. He had heard my story with that half kind of belief that is given to a tale of spirits and supernatural events. But when he was called upon to act officially in consequence, the whole tide of his incredulity returned. He, however, answered mildly, I would willingly afford you every aid in your pursuit, but the creature of whom you speak appears to have powers which would put all my exertions to defiance. Who can follow an animal which can traverse a sea of ice and inhabit caves and dens, where no man would venture to intrude? Besides, some months have elapsed since the commission of his crimes, and no one can conjecture to what place he has wandered, or what region he may now inhabit. I do not doubt that he hovers near the spot which I inhabit, and if he has indeed taken refuge in the Alps, he may be hunted like a chamois, and destroyed as a beast of prey. But I perceive your thoughts. You do not credit my narrative, and do not intend to pursue my enemy with the punishment which is his desert. As I spoke, rage sparkled in my eyes. The magistrates intimidated. You are mistaken, said he. I will exert myself, if it is in my power to seize the monster. Be assured that he shall suffer punishment proportionate to his crimes. But I fear, from what you have yourself described to be his properties, that this will prove impracticable, and that every proper measurement may be pursued, you should endeavor to make up your mind to disappointment. This cannot be, but all that I say will be of little avail. My revenge is of no moment to you, yet, while I allow it to be a vice, I confess it is devouring and only passion of my soul. My rage is unspeakable, while I reflect to you the murderer, whom I have turned loose upon society, still exists. You refuse my just demand. I have but one resource, and I devote myself, either to my life or death, to his destruction. I trembled with excess of agitation as I said this, but there was frenzy in my manner, something, I doubt not, that haughty fierceness which the martyrs of old are said to have possessed. But to a Genevan magistrate, whose mind was occupied by far other ideas and those of devotion and heroism. This elevation of mind had much an appearance of madness. He endeavored to soothe me as the nurse does a child, and reverted to my tale as the effects of delirium. Man, I cried, how ignorant are thou in the pride of thy wisdom! Cease, you know not what it is you say. I broke from the house angry and disturbed, and retired to meditate on some other mode of action. Now, Frankenstein himself wanted this monster hunted down, so there you go. Chapter 23. My present situation was one in which all voluntary thought was swallowed up and lost. I was hurried away by a fury. Revenge only endowed me with the strength and composure. It modeled my feelings and allowed me to be calculating and calm at periods when otherwise delirium or death would have been my promotion. My first resolution was to quit Geneva forever, my country, which, when I was happy and beloved, was dear to me. Now, in my adversity, became hateful. I provided myself with a sum of money, together with a few jewels that had belonged to my mother, and departed. And now my wanderings began, which are to cease but with life. I have traversed a vast portion of the earth, and have endured all the hardships of travelers, in deserts and barbarous countries are wont to meet. How I have lived I hardly know. Many times I have stretched my fallen limbs upon the sandy plain, and prayed for death, but revenge kept me alive. I dared not die and leave my adversary being. When I quitted Geneva, my first labor was to gain some clue by which I might trace the steps of my fiendish enemy. But my plan was unsettled, and I wandered many hours among the confines of town, uncertain what path I should pursue. As night approached, I found myself at the entrance of the cemetery, where William, Elizabeth, and my father reposed. I entered it and approached the tomb which marked their graves. Everything was silent, except the leaves of the trees, which were gently agitated by the wind. The night was nearly dark, and the scene would have been solemn and affecting even to an uninterested observer. The spirits of the departed seemed to flit around, as to cast a shadow, which was felt but not seen, around the head of the mourner. This deep grief was seen and decided and quickly gave way to rage and despair. They were dead, and I lived. Their murderer also lived, and to destroy him must drag out my weary existence. I knelt on the grass and kissed the earth, and with quivering lips exclaimed, by the sacred earth on which I kneel, by the shades that wander near me, by the deep and eternal grief that I feel, I swear, and by thee, O night, and by the spirits that preside over thee, I swear to pursue the demon who caused this misery, till he or I shall perish in mortal conflict. For this purpose I will preserve my life, to execute this dear revenge, will I again behold the sun and tread the green herbage of earth, which otherwise would vanish from my eyes forever. And I call on you, spirits of the dead, and on you, wandering ministers of vengeance, to aid and conduct me in my work. Let the cursed and hellish monster drink deep of agony. Let him feel the despair that now torments me. I had begun my abjuration with solemnity, and an awe which almost assured me that the shades of my murdered friends heard and approved of my devotion. But the furies possessed me as I concluded, and the rage choked my utterance. I was answered through the stillness of night by a loud and fiendish laugh. It rung on my ears, and heavily the mountains re-echoed it,
and I felt as if hell surrounded me with mockery and laughter. Surely in that moment I should have been possessed by frenzy and have destroyed my miserable existence, but that my vow was heard and that I was reserved for vengeance. The laughter died away when a well known and abhorred voice, apparently close to my ear, addressed me in an audible whisper. I am satisfied, miserable wretch. You have determined to live, and I am satisfied. I darted towards the spot from which the sound proceeded, but the devil eluded my grasp. Suddenly I heard a broad disk of the moon. Suddenly the broad disk of the moon arose and shone full upon his ghastly and distorted shape, and he fled with some more than mortal speed. I pursued him, and for many months this has been my task, guided by a slight clue, following the windings of the Rhone, but vainly. The blue Mediterranean approached, and, by a strange chance, I saw the fiend enter by night and hide himself in a vessel bound for the Black Sea. I took my passage in the same ship, but he escaped. I do not know how. Amidst the wilds of Terry and Russia, although he still evaded me, I have ever followed. I followed his tracks. Some of the peasants, scared by this horrid apparition, informed me of his path. Sometimes he himself, who feared that I might get lost if I traced should I suspect die, left some mark to guide me. The snows descended on my head, and I saw the print of his huge step on the white plain. To you, first entering on life, to whom care is new, and agony unknown, how can you understand what I have felt and still feel? Cold, want, and fatigue were the last pains which I was destined to endure. I was cursed by some devil and carried about with me the eternal hell, yet still a spirit of good followed and directed my steps, and when I almost murmured, it would suddenly extricate me in the seemingly insurmountable difficulties. Sometimes, when nature, overcome by hunger, sunk under the exhaustion, a repast was prepared for me in the desert that restored and inspirited me. The fare was indeed coarse, such as the peasants of the country ate, but I may not doubt it was set there by the spirits that I invoked to aid me. Often, when all was dry, the heavens cloudless, and I was parched by thirst, a slight cloud would bedim the sky, shed a few drops that revived me, and vanish. I followed, when I could, the courses of the rivers, but the demon generally avoided these, as it were here the population of the country all chiefly collected. In other places human beings were seldom seen, and I generally subsisted on wild animals that crossed my path. I had money with me, and gained the friendship of the villagers distributing, and bringing with some food that I had killed, which, after taking a small part, I was presented to those who had provided me with a fire and utensils for cooking. My life, as it passed thus, was indeed hateful to me, and it was during sleep alone that I could taste joy. Oh, blessed sleep! Often, when most miserable, I sank to repose, and my dreams lulled me even to rapture. The spirits that guarded me had provided these moments, or rather hours, of happiness, that I might retain my strength to fulfill my pilgrimage. Deprived of this respite, I should have shrunk under my hardships. During the day, I was sustained and inspirited by the hope of night, for in sleep I saw my friends, my wife, and my beloved country. Again, I saw the beloved countenance of my father, heard the silver tones of Elizabeth's voice, and beheld Clerval enjoying health and youth. Often, when wearied by a toilsome march, I persuaded myself that I was dreaming until the night should come, and that I should then enjoy the reality in the arms of my dearest friends. What agonizing fondness did I feel for them? How did I cling to their dear forms? And sometimes they haunted even my waking hours, and persuade myself that they still lived. At such moments, vengeance that burned within me died in my heart, and I pursued my path towards the destruction of the demon, more as a task enjoyed by heaven, as the mechanical impulse of some power of which I was unconscious, than an ardent desire of my soul. What those feelings were whom I pursued, I cannot know. Sometimes, indeed, he left marks in writing on the barks of trees or cut in stone that guided me and instigated my fury. My reign is not yet over. Those words were legible in one of these inscriptions. You live, and my power is complete. Follow me. I seek the everlasting ices of the north, where you will feel the misery of cold and frost, in which I am impassive. You will find near this place, if you follow not too tardily, dead hair. Eat and be refreshed. Come on, my enemy. We have not yet to wrestle for our lives, but many hard and miserable hours must you endure till that period shall arrive. Scoffing devil, again do I vow vengeance. Again do I devote thee, miserable fiend, to torture and death. Never will I omit my search until he or I perish, and then with the ecstasy shall I join my Elizabeth, and those who even now prepare for me to reward my tedious toil and horrible pilgrimage. As I still pursued my journey to the northward, the snows thickened, and the cold increased in a degree almost too severe to support. The peasants were shut up in their hovels, and only a few of the most hardy ventured forth to seize animals whom starvation had forced from their hiding places to seek for prey. The rivers were covered with ice, and no fish could be procured, and thus I was cut off from my chief article of maintenance. The triumph of my enemy increased with the difficulty of my labors. One inscription that he left in these words: Prepare, your toils only begin. Wrap yourself in furs and provide food, for we shall soon enter a journey where your sufferings will satisfy my everlasting hatred. My courage and perseverance were invigorated by these scoffing words. I resolved not to fail in my purpose, and, calling on heaven to support me, I continued with unabated fervor to traverse intense deserts until the ocean appeared at a distance and formed the utmost boundary of the horizon. Oh, how unlike it was the blue seas of the south! Covered with ice, it was only to be distinguished from land by the superior wildness and ruggedness. The Greeks wept for joy when they beheld the Mediterranean from the hills of Asia, and hailed with rapture the bounty of their toils. I did not weep, but I knelt down, and, with a full heart, thanked my guiding spirit for conducting me in safety to the place where I had hoped, notwithstanding my adversary's gibe, to meet and grapple with him. Some weeks before this period, I had procured a sledge and dogs, and thus traversed the sloughs with inconceivable speed. I know not whether the fiend possessed the same advantages, but I found that, as before I had daily lost ground in pursuit, I now gained on him. So much so that when I first saw the ocean, but he was one day's journey in advance, and I hoped to intercept him before he could reach the beach. With new courage, therefore, I pressed on, and in 2 days arrived at the wretched hamlet of the seashore. I inquired of the inhabitants concerning the fiend, and gained accurate information. A gigantic monster, they said, had arrived the night before, armed with a gun and many pistols, putting to flight the inhabitants in a solitary cottage, throughout fear at his terrific appearance. He had carried off with their store of winter food, placing it on a sledge, to draw which he had seized on numerous drove of trained dogs. which he had harnessed them, and at the same night, and to the joy of the horror-struck villagers, he pursued his journey across the sea in the direction that led to no land. But they conjectured that he must speedily be destroyed by the breaking of the ice, or frozen by the eternal frosts. On hearing this information, I suffered a temporary access of despair. He had escaped me, and I must commence a destructive and almost endless journey across the mountainous ices of the ocean. Amidst cold that few of the inhabitants could long endure, which I, native of a genial and sunny climate, could not hope to survive. Yet at the idea that the fiend should live and be triumphant, my rage and vengeance returned, and, like a mighty tide, overwhelmed every other feeling. After a slight repose, during which the spirits of the dead hovered around and instigated me to toil and revenge, I prepared my journey. I exchanged my land sledge for one fashioned in the iniquities for the frozen ocean, and purchasing a plentiful stock of provisions, I departed from land. I cannot guess how many days have passed since then, but I have endured misery, which nothing but the eternal sentiment of a just retribution burning within my heart could have enabled me to support. Immense and rugged mountains of ice often barred up my passage, and I often heard the thunder of the ground sea, which threatened my destruction. But again the frost came and made the paths of the sea secure. By the quantity of provision which I had consumed, I should guess that I had passed 3 weeks on this journey, and the continual protection of hope, returning back upon the heart, often wrung bitter drops of despondency and grief from my eyes. Despair had indeed almost secured her prey, and should I have sunk beneath this misery, when once, after the poor animals had carried me, had with incredible toil gained the summit of a sloping mountain, and one sinking under the fatigue died, I viewed the expanse before me in it with anguish, when suddenly my eye caught the dark speck upon the dusky plain. I strained my sight to discover what it could be, and uttered a wild cry of ecstasy when I distinguished the sled and the distortioned proportions of a well-known form within. Oh, with what a burning gush did hope revisit my heart! Warm tears filled my eyes, which I hastily wiped away, that they might not intercept the view I had of the demon. But still my sight was dimmed by burning drops, until, giving way to the emotions that oppressed me, I wept aloud. But this was not the time for delay. I disencumbered the dogs from my dead companion, gave them plentiful portion of food, and, after an hour's rest, which was absolutely necessary, and which was bitterly irksome to me, I continued my route. The sledge was still visible, nor did I gain or lose sight of it, except at the moments when for a short time ice rock concealed it from my intervening crags. I indeed perceptibly gained on it, and when nearly 2 days' journey, I beheld my enemy at no more than a mile distance. My heart bounded within me. But now, when I appeared almost within grasp of my enemy, my hopes were suddenly extinguished, and I lost all trace of him more utterly than I had done before. The ground sea was heard, the thunder of its progress, and the waters rolled and swelled beneath me, became every moment more ominous and terrific. I pressed on, but in vain. The wind arose, and the sea roared, and, with the mighty shock of an earthquake, it split and cracked with tremendous and overwhelming sound. The work was soon finished. In a few minutes, the tumultuous sea rolled between me and my enemy, and I was left drifting on a scattered piece of ice that was continually lessening, and thus preparing me for hideous death. In this manner, many appalling hours passed. Several of my dogs died, and I myself was about to sink under the accumulation of distress, when I saw your vessel riding in anchor and holding forth to me hopes of securing life. I had no conception that vessels ever came this far north, and was astounded by the sight. I quickly departed part of my sled to construct oars, and by that means I was enabled, with that intimate fatigue, to move my icecraft in the direction of your ship. I had determined, if you were going southward, still to trust myself to the mercy of the seas, rather than abandon my purpose. I hoped to induce you to grant me a boat with which I could pursue my enemy, but your direction was northward. You took me on board with my vigor was exhausted, and I soon should have sunk beneath the multiplied hardships of the death, which I still dread, for my task is unfulfilled. Oh, when will my guiding spirit, in conducting me to the demon, allow me to rest that has so much desire? I must die, and he yet live. If I do, swear to me, Walton, that he shall not escape, that you will seek him, and satisfy my vengeance to his death. Yet, do I dare ask you to undertake my pilgrimage, to endure the hardships that I have undergone? No, I am so selfish, not so selfish. Yet, when I am dead, if he should appear, if the ministers of vengeance should conduct you to him, swear that he shall not live. Swear that he shall not triumph over my accumulated woes, and live to make another such a wretch as I am. He is eloquent and persuasive, and once his words had even power over my heart. But trust him not. His soul is hellish as his form, full of treachery and fiend-like malice. Hear him not. Call the names of William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth, my father, and of the wretched Victor, and thrust your sword into his heart. I will hover near and direct the steel right. Walton, in continuation. August 26th. You have read the strange and terrific story, Margaret, and do you not feel your blood congeal with horror, like that which even now curdles mine? Sometimes seized with sudden agony, he could not continue his tale. At others, his voice broken yet piercing, uttered with difficulty the words so replete with agony. His fine, lovely eyes were now lighted up with indignation, now subdued to downcast sorrow, and quenched into infinite wretchedness. Sometimes he commanded his countenance and tones, and related the most horrible incidents with a tranquil voice, suppressing every mark of agitation. Then, like a volcano bursting forth, his face would suddenly change to an expression of wildest rage as he shrieked out imprecations of his persecutor. His tale is connected, and told with an appearance of simplest truth. Yet I own you too that the letters of Felix and Safie, which he showed me, the apparition of the monster, seen from our ships, brought me to greater conviction of the truth of his narrative than his assertions, however earnest and connected. Such a monster has really existence. I cannot doubt it, yet I am lost in surprise and admiration. Sometimes I endeavored to gain from Frankenstein the particulars of the monk creation's formation, but his point was impenetrable. "Are you mad, my friend?" said he. "Or whither does your senseless curiosity lead you? Would you also create for yourself and the world demonically enemy? Or to what your questions read? Peace, peace, learn my miseries, and do not seek to increase your own. Frankenstein discovered that I made notes concerning his history. He asked to see them, and then he himself corrected and augmented them in many places, but principally in giving the life and the spirit to conversations he held with his enemy. Since you have not perceived my narration, said he, I could not let the mutilated one should go down to prosperity. Thus has a week passed, while I have listened to the strangest tale that ever imagination formed. My thoughts and every feeling of my soul have been drunk up by the interest for my guest, which his tale and his own elevated and gentle manners have created. I wish to soothe him, yet I can counsel yet can I counsel one so infinitely miserable, so destitute of every hope of consolation, to live? Oh no, the only joy that he can now know will be when he composes and shattered feelings to peace and death. Yet he enjoys one comfort, the offspring of solitude and delirium. He believes that when he dreams he holds converse with his friends, and derives from them communion consolation for the miseries and excitements to his vengeance, that they are not the creations of his fancy, but the real beings who visit him in the regions of a remote world. This faith gives him solemnity to the reveries that render him to be almost as imposing and interesting as truth. Our conversations are not always confined to his own history and misfortunes. On every point of general literature he displays unbounded knowledge and a quick and piercing apprehension. His eloquence is forcible and touching, nor can I hear him when he relates a pathetic incident, or endeavors to move the passions of pity or love without tears. What a glorious creature he must have been in the days of his prosperity, when he is thus noble, godlike, and ruined. He seems to feel his own worth and the greatness of his fall. When younger, he said, I felt as if I were destined for some great enterprise. My feelings are profound, but I possess the coolness of judgment that fitted me for illustrious achievements. This sentiment of worth of my nature supported me, when others would have been oppressed. For I deemed it criminal to throw away the useless grief for those talents that might be useful to my fellow creatures. When I reflected on the work I had completed, no less than one of creation, a sensitive and rational animal, could I not rank myself with a herd of common projectors. But this feeling, which supported me in the commencement of my career, now serves only to plunge me lower in the dust. All my speculations and hopes are as nothing, and, like the archangel who aspired at omnipotence, I am chained to an eternal hell. My imagination was vivid, yet my powers in analysis and application were intense. But the union of these qualities, I conceived the idea and executed the creation of a man. Even now I cannot recollect without passion the reveries while the work was incomplete. I trod heaven in my thoughts, now exulting in my powers, now burning with the idea of their effects. From the infancy I was imbued with high hopes and a lofty ambition, but how I am sunk! Oh, my friend, if you had known me as I once was, you would not recognize me from the state of degradation. Despondency rarely visits my heart. A high destiny seemed to bear on me until I fell, never, never again to rise. Must I then lose this admirable being? I have longed for a friend. I have sought one who would sympathize with me and love me. Behold, on the desert seas I have found such a one. But I fear I have gained him only to know his value and lose him. I reconcile him to life, but he repulses the idea. I thank you, Walton, he said, for your kind intentions towards so miserable a wretch. But when you speak of new ties and fresh affections, think you that any can replace those who are gone? Can any man be to me as Clerval was, or any woman another Elizabeth? Even where the affections are not strongly moved by any superior excellence, the companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds, which hardly any later friend can obtain. They know our infinite dispositions, which, however they may be afterwards modified, are never eradicated, and they can only judge our actions and move certain conclusions as to the integrity of our motives. A brother or sister can never, unless indeed such symptoms have been shewn lately, suspect the other of fraud or false dealing. When another friend, however strongly may be attached, may, in spite of himself, be invaded with suspicion. But I enjoyed friends, dear not only through the habit of association, but from their own merits. And I, wherever I am, the soothing voice of Elizabeth, the conversation of Clerval, will be ever whispered in my ear. And they are dead. But one feeling in such solitude can persuade me to preserve my life. If I were engaged in any high undertaking or design, fraught with extensive utility to my fellow creatures, then I could live to fulfill it. But such is not my destiny. I must pursue and destroy the being to whom I gave existence. Then my lot on earth will be fulfilled, and I may die. September 2nd. My beloved sister, I write you, encompassed by peril and ignorance whether I am doomed to ever see dear England, and my dear friends that inhabit it. I am surrounded by mountains of ice, which admit no escape and threaten every movement to cross our vessel. The brave fellows whom I have persuaded to be my companions look towards me for aid, but I have none to bestow. There is something terribly appalling in our situation, yet my courage and hopes do not desert me. We may survive, and if we do not, I will repeat the lessons of Mazinica, and die with a good heart. Yet, what, Margaret, will be the state of your mind? You will not hear of my destruction, and you will anxiously await my return. Years will pass, and you will have visitings of despair, and yet be tortured by hope. Oh, my beloved sisters, the sickening failings of your heartfelt expectations are, in prospect, more terrible to me than my own death. But you have a husband and lovely children. You may be happy. Heaven bless you and make you so. My unfortunate guest regards me with tenderness companion. He endeavors to fill me with hope, and he talks as if life were a possession which he valued. He reminds me of how often the same accidents have occurred in other navigators who have attempted to sea, and in spite of myself, he fills me with cheerful auguries. Even the sailors feel the power of his eloquence. When he speaks, they no longer despair. He arouses their energies, and, while I hear his voice, they believe these vast mountains of ice are molehills, which will vanish before the resolutions of man. These feelings are transitory. Each day's expectations delayed fill them with fear. I almost dread a mutiny caused by despair. September 5th. A scene has just passed with such uncommon interest that although it is highly probable that these papers may never reach you, I cannot forbear reporting it. We are still surrounded by mountains of ice, still in imminent danger of being crushed by their conflict. The cold is excessive, and many of the unfortunate comrades have already found a grave amidst the scene of desolation. Frankenstein has daily declined in health. A feverish fire still glimmers in his eyes, but he is exhausted, and when suddenly roused by any exhortation, speedily sinks into apparent lifelessness. I mentioned in my last letter the fears I had entertained of mutiny. This morning, as I watched the worn countenance of my friend, his eyes half closed and his limbs hanging listlessly, I was roused by half a dozen of the sailors, who desired admission into the cabin. They entered, and their leader addressed me. He told me that he and his companions had been chosen by the other sailors to come in deputation to me, to make me a demand, which, in justice, I could not refuse. We were mirrored in ice, and should probably never escape. They feared that, if it was possible, the ice should dissipate, and a free passage be opened, I should be rash enough to continue my voyage, and lead them into fresh dangers, after they might happily have surmounted this. They desired, therefore, that I should engage in a solemn promise that if the vessel should be freed, I would instantly direct my course southward. This speech troubled me. I had not despaired, nor had I yet conceived the idea of returning, if set free. Yet I could, in justice, or even in possibility, refuse this demand. I hesitated before I answered, when Frankenstein, who had first been silent and indeed appeared hardly to have force enough to attend, now roused himself. His eyes sparkled, and his cheeks flushed with momentary vigor. Turning towards the men, he said, "What do you mean? What do you demand of your captain? Are you so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this a glorious exposition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way was smooth and placid as the southern sea, but because it is full of dangers and terror, because at every new incident your fortitude must be called forth, and your courage exhibited, because danger and death surrounded, and these dangers you are too brave to overcome. For this was for this it was glorious. For this it was an honorable undertaking. You here you were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your species, your names adored, to belong to brave men who encountered death for honor and the benefits of mankind. And now, behold, the first imagination of danger, or, if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away and are confident to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure cold and peril. And so, poor souls, they were chilly and returned to their warm firesides. Why, that requires not this preparation. You need not have come thus far and dragged your captain to the shame of a defeat, merely to prove yourselves cowards. Oh, be men, or be more than men. Be steady to your purposes and firm as a rock. This ice is not made of such stuff as your hearts might be. This is mutable, cannot withstand you. If you say that it shall not, do not return to your families with the stigma of disgrace marked on your brows. Return as heroes who have fought and conquered, and who know not what it is to turn their backs on the foe. He spoke with a voice so modulated that to the different feelings expressed by the speech, with eyes so full of lofty-eyed design and heroism, that who can wonder what these men moved? They looked to one another and were unable to reply. I spoke. I told them to retire and consider what had been said, that I would not lead them further north if they strenuously desired the contrary, but that I hoped that with reflection their courage would return. They retired, and I turned towards my friend, but he was sunk in languor and almost deprived of life. How all this will terminate, I know not, but I had rather die than return shamefully, my purpose unfulfilled. Yet I fear such will be the fates. The man unsupported by ideas of glory and honor can never willingly continue to endure their present hardships. September 7th. The die is cast. I have consented to return if we are not destroyed. Thus my hopes blasted by cowardice and indecision. I come back ignorant, disappointed. It requires more philosophy than I possess to bear this injustice and patience. September 12th. It is past. I am returning to England. I have lost my hopes of utility and glory. I have lost my friend. But I will endeavor to detail these bitter circumstances to you, my dear sister, and while I have wafted towards England, towards you, I will not despond. On September 9th, the ice began to move. The roarings like thunder were heard at a distance, and the island split and cracked in every direction. We were most imminent peril, and we could only remain passive. My chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased in such a degree that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked between us and was driven with force towards the north. A breeze sprung from the west, and on the 11th, the passage toward the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, and that their return to the native country was apparently assured, a shout of tumultuous joy broke from them, loud and loud continued. Frankenstein, who was dozing, awoke and asked what the cause of the tumult. They shout, I said, because they will soon return to England. Do you then really return? Alas, yes. I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and I must return. Do so, if you will, but I will not. You may give up your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I dare not. I am weak, but surely the spirits who have adjusted my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength. Saying this, he endeavored to spring from his bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. It was long before he was restored, and I was often thought that life was entirely extinct. At length he opened his eyes, but he breathed with such difficulty and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend had not many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought that he slept. But presently he called me in his feeble voice, and bidding come near me. Alas, the strength I relied on is gone. I feel that I shall soon die, and he, my enemy and my persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton, that in the last moments of my existence I feel that the burning hatred and ardent desire for revenge I once expressed, but I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary. During these last few days, I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature who was bound towards him to assure, as far as was in my power, the happiness of well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duty towards my fellow creatures had greater claims on my attention, because they included greater proportions of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused, and I did refuse, right in refusing, to create a companion for the first creature. He showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness and evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to the destruction of beings who possessed exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor do I know where this thirst for vengeance may end. Miserable himself that he may render no other wretched. He ought to die. The task of this destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish, vicious motives, I ask you to undertake my unfinished work, and I renew this request now, when I am only induced by reason and virtue. Yet I cannot ask you to renounce your country and friends to fulfill this task, and now that you are returning to England, you will have little chance of meeting with them. But this consideration of these points, the moral balancing of what you may esteem your duties, I leave to you. My judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of death. I dare not ask you to do what I think right, for I may still be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me. In other aspects, this hour, when I momentarily expect my release, is the only happy one I have enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms. Farewell, Wilton. Seek happiness and tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discovery. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes, yet another may succeed. His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sunk into silence. About an hour and a half afterwards, he attempted again to speak, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, while the irradiation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow. My mind is overshadowed with a cloud of disappointments. But I journey towards England, and may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? It is midnight. The breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stir. Again, there is a sound as of a human voice, but coarser. It comes from the cabin where the remains of Frankenstein lie still. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God, what a scene has taken place. I am yet dizzy from the remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it, yet the tale which I have recorded will be incomplete without this final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin where lay the remains of my ill-fated admiral friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find the words to describe. Gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in its proportions. As he hung over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended in color and apparently texture like that of a mummy. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror, and sprung towards the window. Never did I behold a vision so horrible as his face, by such loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I shut my eyes involuntarily and endeavored to recollect what my duties were with regard to this destroyer. I called on him to stay. He paused, looking on me with wonder, and again turning towards the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by a wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion. That is also my victim, he exclaimed. In his murder my crimes are consummated. This miserable series of my being is wound to a close. Oh, Frankenstein, generous, self-devoted being. What does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I who irretrievably destroyed thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold. He may not answer me. His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me the duty of obeying the dying request of my friend and destroying his enemy, were now suspended by a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached this tremendous being. I dared not again raise my looks upon his face. There was something so scaring and unearthly in his ugliness. I attempted to speak, but the words died away on my lips. The monster continued to utter wild and incoherent self-reproaches. At length, I gathered resolution to address him, in a pause of his temper, of his passion. Your repentance, I said, is now superfluous. If you had listened to the voice of consciousness, and heeded the strings of remorse, before you had urged your diabolical vengeance to this extremity, Frankenstein would yet have lived. Do you dream? Said the demon. Do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse? He continued, pointing to the corpse. He suffered not more in the consummation of the deed. Oh, not just 10,000 portion of the anguish that was mine during the lingering detail of its execution. A frightful selfishness hurried on me, while my heart was poisoned with remorse. Think yet that there groaned so clearly music to my ears. My heart is fashioned to be susceptible to love and sympathy, and when wretched by misery to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of a change without tortures such as you cannot even imagine. After the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland broken-hearted and overcome. I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. I abhorred myself. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and of unspeakable torments, dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated richness and despair upon me, he sought his own enjoyment and feelings and passions from the indulgence of which I was forever barred. The important envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I recollected my threat and resolved that it should be accomplished. I knew that he was preparing for myself a deadly torture, but I was his slave, not the master of an impulse, which I detested, yet could not disobey. Yet when she died, nay, then I was not miserable. I had cast off all fumes, subdued all anguish to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil thenceforth became my good. Urged thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element which I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demonical design came in insatiable passion, and now it is ended. There lay my last victim. I was at first touched by the expressions of his misery, yet when I called to mind what Frankenstein had said of his powers of eloquence and persuasion, and when I was cast my eyes on the lifeless form of my friend, indignation was rekindled within me. Wretch, I said, it is well that you come here to whine over the desolation that you have made. Throw a torch into a pile of buildings, and when they are consumed, you sit among the ruins and laments the fall. Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object. Again he would become the prey of your accursed vengeance. Yet is it not pity that you feel? You only lament because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power. Oh, it is is not thus, interrupted the being. Yet such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purport of my actions. Yet I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I find. When I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection with which my whole being overflowed, that I wished to be participated in. But now that virtue has become to me a shadow, and that happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair, and what should I seek of sympathy? I am content to suffer alone, while my suffering shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied in the abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, of fame, and of enjoyment. Once I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I am capable of bringing forth. I was punished with high thoughts of honor and devotion. But now vice has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No crime, no mischief, no malignity, no mercy can be found comparable to mine. When I call over the frightful catalogue of my deeds, I cannot believe I am he whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of beauty and the majesty of goodness. But it is even so, the fallen angel becomes a malignant devil. Yet even that enemy of God and man had friends and associates in his desolation. I am quite alone. You call Frankenstein your friend, seem to have a knowledge of my crimes and his misfortunes. But in the detail which he gave you of them, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery which I had endured, wasting my impotent passions. For whilst I destroyed his hopes, I did not satisfy my own desires. They were forever ardent and craving. Still I desired love and fellowship, and I was still spurned. Was there no injustice in this? Am I to be thought the only criminal when all humankind sinned against me? Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from his door with contumely? Why do you not execrate the rustic who sought to destroy the savior of his child? Nay, these are virtuous and immaculate beings. The miserable and the abandoned and abortion to be spurned at and kicked and trampled on. Even now my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice. But it is true that I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the innocent as they slept, and grasped to death the throat of whoever injured me or any other living being. I have devoted my Creator, the select specimen of all that is worthy of love and admiration among men, to misery. I have punished him even to that irremediable ruin. There he lies, white and cold in death. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that which I regard myself. I look on the hands which I executed the deed. I think of the heart in which the imagination of it was conceived. I long for the moment when they will meet my eyes, when it will haunt my thoughts no more. Fear not that I shall instrument of future mischief. My work is nearly complete. Neither yours nor your men's death is needed to consummate the series of my being and accomplish that which must be done, but it requires my own. Do not think that I shall be slow to perform the sacrifice. I shall put your vessel on an ice raft which brought me hither, and I shall seek the most northern extremity of the globe. I shall not I shall collect my funeral fire and consume to ashes all this miserable frame that it remains to afford no light to any curious or unhallowed wretch who would create such another as I have been. I shall no longer feel the agonies which now consume me, and be the prey of feelings unsatisfied, yet unquenched. He is dead who called me into being, and when I shall be no more, the very remembrance of us both will speedily vanish. I shall no longer see the sun or stars, or feel the winds play on my cheeks. Light, feeling, and sense will all pass away, and in this condition must I find my happiness. Some years ago, when the first images which this world affords first opened upon me, when I felt the cheering warmth of the sun, when I heard the rustling of the leaves and the chirping of birds, and all these were mine, I should have wept to die. Now it is only consolation. Polluted by crimes, torn from the bitterest remorse, where can I find rest but in death? Farewell, I leave you, and you and the last of the humankind eyes will ever behold. Farewell, Frankenstein. If thou wert yet alive, and yet cherished the decline of revenge on me, it would be a better satiated in my life than in my destruction. But it was not so. Thou didst seek my extinction, that I might not cause greater wretchedness, and if yet, in some mode unknown to me, thou hast not yet ceased to think and feel, thou desirest not my life for my own misery. Blasted thou wert, my agony was still superior to thine, for the bitter sting of remorse may not cease to rankle in my wounds until death shall close them forever. But soon, he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die, and what I feel now will no longer be felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pyre triumphantly, and result in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of my conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace, or if it thinks, it shall surely not think thus. Farewell. He sprang from the cabin window as he said this, upon the ice raft which lay loose close to my vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves, lost in the darkness and distance. Okay, well, that is how things are. That is how things shall end. As that is literally how the book ends. Drop my cuff, drop. Oh, well, that was the end of Frankenstein and the self-declared end of his creation. So, what do you think, Cubs?
be too late for me to continue using this voice again. Though I do rather like doing the voice for the creation. And, Frankenstein himself told Walden that he spoke eloquently. So, oh, yeah, thank everyone for coming in, though. That was cool. Let's see who's on that we can read. Let's see, anyone else reading? Let's see what else is reading. Or if anyone has any recommendations on a grade, that'd be great. Let's see. Following anyone who's on that is not affiliated yet. Hmm. I really want to help people get affiliated, but I'm not seeing anyone. No. Let's see. Maybe real attack and raid someone as they're asleep. Not sure what I would do to them, but anyone have suggestions? I'm kind of open, right? Nope. Why is my model asleep? Hello? Okay. That's weird. Did I put myself to sleep? Bridger has stopped working. Well, that's dandy. Well, fun that way. If I like it. Can't believe I put my model to sleep. That's crazy. There we go. Anyway. Guess that's what happens when you use access programs. Uh, let's see. It was awkward. Hmm. Hmm. It's been read Dusk. It's like just playing a spooky game. I've never seen Faith, so yep, let's go reader. What the hell? All right, Cubs. Glad you all came in when you did, and hope you all have a good night. I guess I'll have to think of what to read next Wednesday. No, not Wednesday, Thursday. I already found the next book of fairy tales for my Friday, so I just have to find out what the interest elements of on Wednesday. So, have a good night, Cubs. Thank you all for coming in. See you around next time. All right.